Today we're at the round table on explaining digital risk to the board to justify ROI in partnership with Scurio. Jeremy, what were the most interesting things to come out today for you?
I think it's really interesting hearing CISOs from a variety of companies of different sizes talk about how they present digital risk to the board and cybersecurity to the board and justify those investments. And it was interesting seeing some companies that were relatively early on the maturity scale and how they would communicate things to the board. One of them was talking about having 10 key risk indicators that they use consistently so they could demonstrate progress against that. Whereas other organisations were much more sophisticated and already doing a lot of risk modelling across their business, not just digital risk, but just risk across all aspects, and the cybersecurity element fed into that digital risk assessment.
One of the key takeaway was to understand how everybody is dealing with board level engagement, and it's good to see that there's a diversity in that as well, so that from education to simulation to bringing in non-exec directors who are security experts in their own right to help the board discussions.
I suppose the main takeaway was about how to interact with the board, and there was a lot of conversation about how different companies react to presenting different things, of course, to different boards, because all boards are different. And that was one of the key takeaways, is that each individual member of the board is an individual, and perhaps treating them as individuals rather than as this amorphous group known as the board is probably the winning strategy.
What about risks outside the perimeter?
Yeah, I think that's, again, digital transformations affecting all the businesses, and some of them are already very transformed. Whereas others are really early in that stage. And I think that there was a lot of conversation about how you look after data once it's outside the perimeter and how you assess your suppliers in terms of their security maturity, just because the supply chains are so complex now that a breach is quite likely to happen outside the supply chain. So quite a lot of discussion about how do you do that, how do you audit those suppliers, and how do you look after your data when it's being processed by someone else.
And what did you see as the main difference between, say, yourself in the public sector and private sector in terms of what the board found important, whether it was loss of money, risk, IP, reputation?
So there is not much of a difference between private sector and public sector in terms of the risk. It is all data, it is all financials. There is going to be an impact on balance sheet. And whilst public sector does focus a lot around reputation and personal data, all organisations in the private sector are doing the same. So it's good to see that we are all tackling security and risk around security in the same way.
And did you get the impression that boards now do understand cybersecurity as a business risk?
I think they're getting there. I think certainly there is increased awareness, and GDPR fines, the headline fines, I think help cement that. But it's clear that selling this on the basis of fear of a big GDPR fine at the board level isn't the right way to do it anymore. I think everyone's been there, done that. I think it's more about understanding this is business as usual for people, and it's just something else they have to consider and mitigate as part of their overall business risk.